All right. Hi, everybody. Um, so today we're going to be talking about my thoughts on Nietzsche's eternal recurrence of the same and pure duration. If you guys don't know, pure duration or the concept of duration kind of comes from Henry Bergson, uh, but the kind of duration that I understand, because I haven't read Henry Bergson, is via Muhammad Iqbal. So that means when I talk about pure duration, it's only going to be the way Muhammad Iqbal understands pure duration via his own interpretation of um, Henry Bergson. But anyway, so the reason why I got this thought for this video is because like my mind is literally exploding right now. It's exploding in a million places. So I figured I had to do this video just to get all my thoughts out, and then maybe I'll write about it later. Um, so this is what initiated the whole thing. What initiated the whole thing is right now I'm reading Zarathustra. I'm like almost finished with it. Like I think I bought the book like literally 2 days ago, and Zarathustra just kind of just like swallowed me, and I've been absolutely loving it. I think there is something to be said about like poetic philosophical pieces of work. I think those seem to be like my favorite. Those seem to be the ones that really pull me in. It kind of makes sense why I like, Martin Buber, I like Muhammad Iqbal, and I like Nietzsche. But so okay, so let's begin. I'm gonna point out something in Thus Spoke Zarathustra, and we'll just kind of think about it, and then I'm gonna tell you why. And so I'm going to say my controversial thought right now. My controversial thought right now with understanding the eternal recurrence of the same is this. And I'll explain later that actually the eternal recurrence of the same already implies within itself another concept of time. And trust me, I will explain. I'll probably spend time explaining why that is for the rest of my time of this video. All right, so let's begin. Right, so if we start with the section on Thus Spoke Zarathustra of the vision and the riddle, we get to section 2. Nietzsche starts with there's this gateway, right? And he says, it has, behold this gateway, dwarf, I went on. It has two aspects. Two paths come together here. No one has ever reached their end. This long lane behind us, and it goes on for eternity. And that long lane ahead of us, that is another eternity, right? So automatically, what we see, and this is how I imagined it, because even though Nietzsche says right here, all truth is crooked, time itself is a circle, this description of there's this long lane behind us and this long lane in front of us, and then we're at the gateway, the only thing I imagine is this, right? I basically imagine something like this, like the infinity, like basically the infinity sign. I imagine the infinity sign. It's two circles, basically touching each other, meeting together, and this is how I interpret the gateway. So, and if we look at this further, right, he says they are opposition to one another. These paths, they are a but on one another, and it is here at this gateway that they come together. The name of the gateway is written above it, moment. So this is why I start thinking that actually within the eternal recurrence of the same, it's actually basically two circles, right? Time itself is a circle when Nietzsche says this, but it's not one circle. It's basically two circles meeting. And this meeting is the gateway, and that's what he calls the moment. Now, he talks about behold this moment, so on and so on. Okay, so why am I talking about this specific passage with the moment? All right, so I bring this up because Iqbal talks about this. Muhammad Iqbal is a Muslim philosopher that basically just barely missed Nietzsche in terms of timeline. Like that's how close they are together. And because of this, Iqbal has this interpretation of Nietzsche that actually, I mean, I'm not even sure if it's because of that, but they were close in timeline. That's all I'm trying to say. And anyways, so Iqbal is very much influenced by Nietzsche, but the way he interprets the internal recurrence of the same in his book called The Reconstruction of Religious Thought in Islam is that he says Nietzsche's own eternal recurrence of the same is just like basically this mechanism that is like it's a mechanism that doesn't allow anything new to occur, basically, right? Because everything's the same. All the energy is always already in place, repeating itself, and so on. Now, the problem I have with Iqbal's interpretation of the internal recurrence of the same is exactly what I'm picking out here from this. That there's this gateway, this meeting point between the two infinities, what lies ahead of us and what lies behind us. And so basically what I'm trying to say is Iqbal doesn't think repetition. He doesn't think repetition in the most radical way. And if he were to think repetition in the most radical way, he would understand that repetition itself allows for newness to occur. And I think that's why Iqbal, actually, I think him being against neo-Hegelianism is actually kind of against him here, because if he were to think repetition in a radical way, he would understand that actually it's the radical repetition itself that allows newness to come into existence, in my opinion. Because, I mean, if you take the eternal recurrence as like some type of rigid mechanism, then it doesn't make any sense for what would allow becoming in the first place, right? Like how would becoming be allowed to take place if everything is already like been there, right? Like then becoming is kind of like it's always like a past like thing, and I think that's why I kind of I'm against Iqbal's interpretation of the eternal recurrence of the same here, because I do think that there is something. I think what's beautiful about Nietzsche's eternal recurrence of the same is obviously there's something contradictory about it. And I think that's actually what reveals something special about the eternal recurrence of the same. And I think if we actually think of the eternal recurrence of the same as this radical repetition, and then this is the bridging thought, right? And so before I go into this bridging thought here, the reason why Iqbal disagrees with Nietzsche's eternal recurrence of the same is because he's also a fan of Henry Bergson, where he very much takes influence from Bergson's work, Creative Evolution. So he thinks that actually everything in itself is always, everything that unfolds in creation is always something new, right? But what's interesting is that if everything is always something new, right, this new unfolding, this new creation that is unfolding, Iqbal doesn't see that within this constant newness, there is the repetition. Notice the constant, the unfolding, right? So there is repetition within the very idea of propagating newness, right? Like so that means there's a pattern, right? If everything is always unfolding into something new, into new, into new, into new, into new, that's a pattern, that's a repetition. So actually I'm gonna use, so Iqbal ironically tries to use an example, to a tangible example, to prove to us pure duration, right? And this is what he quotes for an example of pure duration, right? He says this in the section of the Revelations of Religious Experience. He says, "It is, however, impossible to express this inner experience of pure duration in words. For language is shaped on the serial time of our daily efficient self." And that's a whole nother philosophical topic of like how Iqbal divides itself into two selves, efficient and appreciative. But anyways, he continues, right? He says, "Perhaps an illustration will further elucidate the point. According to physical science, the cause of your sensation of red is the rapidity of wave motion, the frequency of which is 400 billions per second. If you observe this tremendous frequency from the outside and count it at the rate of 2,000 per second, which is supposed to be the limit of the perceptibility of light, it will take you more than 6,000 years to finish the enumeration. Yet in the single momentary mental act of perception, you hold together a frequency of wave motion which is practically incalculable. This is how the mental act transforms succession into duration." Okay. So, my book just fell. So, if we take Iqbal's example of how we perceive red light, red color, right? Iqbal is saying that pure duration, a tangible example of pure duration is this. That actually the wave frequency of the red light that allows us to see red is going at such a repetition, going at such a frequency, that in one single mental act of our perception, we grasp the whole thing, right? Whereas if we were to count every wave, it would take us like years, right? It would take us years to sort of grasp the whole frequency and understand that is the color red. But in fact, our faculties is what help us grasp the frequency and the repetition into one single perception, right? This is the color red. And for Iqbal, this is an example of pure duration, how you can capture something and its pure wholeness, right? And that you can see how there's successive time, but within successive time, there is the capturing of its wholeness, right? And this is how he relates the frequency of the wave patterns of the red color, but then the way we receive it is this one single moment of perception as just the color red, which is very brilliant in my opinion. Okay. But what's interesting about this is that Iqbal's example, he doesn't see within his own example of trying to show us pure duration, that within pure duration itself, what allows for pure duration is the frequency of the waves, is the repetition, the repeated pattern of the waves for us in order to grasp that single momentary mental act of perception of the color red. And so if we think, and of course this is my controversial take now of the eternal recurrence of the same, is actually the eternal recurrence of the same actually allows for pure duration. And it's the very meeting, and I quoted here, when Zarathustra is talking about that there is an eternity ahead of us and there's eternity behind us, and then at the gateway it's called moment, right? Notice how this is what's interesting, right? The very meeting place of the eternity ahead of us and the eternity behind us is pure duration. That is my controversial take on all this. It is pure duration. And that's so and that, yeah, I don't even know what to say else about that. I mean, I'm just kind of speechless about that. But I actually think Nietzsche's eternal recurrence of the same is radical repetition, in the sense that it is such a radical repetition that actually it allows for a moment to exist like that, the gateway, the moment. And this would actually flow in perfectly with Buber's I and Thou, where he talks about the Thou is the present, right? It is beyond space and time. So it's beyond successive time, beyond linear time. And I know Nietzsche's eternal recurrence of the same is supposed to do the same thing, but it's that repetition. Again, it's that repetition itself that allows for pure duration, in my opinion, right? So again, if I were just to really just simplify everything what I'm saying is I feel like actually within Nietzsche's very own eternal recurrence of the same, there's actually another time within that time. That time is what you could call pure duration. That time is what you could call the eternal now, the present, the moment. And yeah, that's that's my controversial take. And I think Buber, and I think my other controversial take is I think Buber takes Nietzsche's eternal recurrence of the same, because Buber did read Nietzsche, and he just says, and I swear to God, I think Buber read this exact same passage that I just read from Nietzsche about, there's the eternity ahead of us and there's the eternity behind us, and at the meeting place of the two is just called moment. Because Buber says something very interesting where he says all real relation is meeting, right? All real relation is meeting. And then Buber says something else about, like, if we live in a world of subject and objects, we're always in the past. So the only way to bring us out of that past is to sort of have a relation, right? And that means to be in the present, and relation is always in the present. So it seems like what Buber is doing is he's taking the eternal recurrence of the same, and he's making it a tangible experience. Well, he won't even say that's an experience. He's making a tangible relation of how things meet, how things actually have relations with each other. And it's that exact meeting point, the moment, what Nietzsche describes, of what what lies ahead of us and what lies behind us. So yeah, I think that is definitely my most controversial take, is that actually within the very eternal recurrence of the same, there is another time. There is another time that results from Nietzsche's own doctrine. I mean, I wouldn't even say like it's a consequence of it. It is just already within it. As you see me quoting the passage of the moment. Of course, there's probably many ways, and I think this is going to be my subjective interpretation coming in here. This is going to be my projection coming in here. Where obviously I'm projecting on my interpretation of the moment, where I interpret the moment as the present, the moment as a real meeting. And I think there's room for that interpretation there within Nietzsche. So yeah, hope you guys liked all that. I do plan on writing this somehow in some fashion. It's a lot of thoughts. I know I expressed it in a kind of like, whatever manner, but it's a lot of thoughts. It's a kind of a critique of Iqbal at the same time, but yeah, if it's interesting, and I think it really does come down to the problem of repetition. Because Nietzsche obviously understands repetition, but I think he purposely leaves out the explicit newness that comes out. Even though you're like, I think he goes straight to the newness with the Overman. But yeah, I always think, Nietzsche's contradictory ideas is actually very purposeful and useful anyways. And I think Nietzsche was aware of it. And I want to say he was very much aware of it, and he did it on purpose. Yeah. But all right, guys, take care.